Well, hi again, Monster fans, and welcome here to Rocket Arena for another edition of Monsters OT on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We're proudly presented by Century Federal. Tony Brown here with you. We'll hear from my co-host, Brad Thiessen, in just a few moments. But we've got a big show coming up as a little bit later on. We'll see who's hot across the American Hockey League with Nick Blazer. We'll, of course, take a look at our Monsters alumni segment presented by True North Convenience Stores, and we'll take a little spin through Whistle Express Car Wash in Parma as we'll keep it clean with Monsters captain Stefan Matteau. But as we always do, let's begin the show with headlines. All right, let's start with headlines alongside Brad Thiessen here talking about a tough trip down to the Lone Star State in Texas. Just here recently, Brad, Monsters dropped a couple of games to the Texas Stars. They're a really contending team in the Central Division and a team with a high-flying offense, and it was a 4-1 loss followed by a 5-4 loss that was highly competitive. But for the Monsters, right now, they need wins this time of year.
Yeah, they do, and obviously a nice place for the guys to go to down in Texas. A little sunshine, kind of refresh a little bit, and a couple good efforts from the Monsters. But at this time of year, you need to find some points. Let's
dissect those games a little bit here. First, the 4-1 loss on Friday. Now, I thought it was a closer game than the final score indicated, but nice to see James Malatesta, Brad, score a goal, his first since coming off a lengthy injury absence, and Zach Sawchenko played pretty well, too.
Yeah, James Malatesta obviously provides that energy, gets in on the forecheck, lays the body out, but as you know, in junior, he was a goal scorer too. So for him to be able to find the back of the net, that bodes well as the season starts to wind down and guys are looking to score some goals.
Yeah, and that goal was assisted by Jordan Dumais, so those two creating a little bit of chemistry there. And again, the word with Malatesta, energy, as he's getting back into the swing of things here after that long injury absence. The next game, Brad, though, on Saturday, the 15th of March, a 1-goal defeat, 5-4 final score. Texas turned to their guy, Monte Blumel, hat trick, which he capped off in the final minute of regulation in that victory. But the Monsters played really well. I thought they deserved a better fate in that game as they competed as hard as possible.
Yeah, going down to the last minute of the game tied, you really want to be able to come out with a point. Obviously, they couldn't contain Blumel, one of the top scorers in the league, picking up the hat trick. But again, you want to try and take some positives out of that game because they did, a lot of guys scoring goals that maybe they hadn't in a little while.
Yeah, that's a great point because that's been a struggle for Cleveland here lately, scoring just in general. And the Monsters got goals in that game from Jordan Dumais, from Joseph Labate. First AHL goal and first Cleveland goal for Drew Bavaro. We'll talk more about him in a minute. Max McHugh scored as well, but Brad, as we'll highlight him later in the show, Pavel Chayan was back up with Cleveland from ECHL Cincinnati. That was his first appearance since, I believe, December the 19th, and I thought he battled.
Yeah, he did, and obviously a quick turnaround, getting the call Friday, flying up to get it there in time for the game to back up on Friday night in Texas, and then getting the start Saturday. But he's done a really nice job in Cincinnati this year for the Cyclones, and he stepped in and gave the Monsters a chance to win.
Well, let's take a look now at the North Division standings as we continue on headlines here following those losses for Cleveland. And Brad, right now the pressure is starting to mount for the Monsters as Laval has separated themselves a little bit. 81 points. They're now an impressive 5 points clear of second place. Rochester after that, Toronto. They've created a little space between third place and fourth place in the division, but Cleveland's not in fourth place anymore. It's the Syracuse Crunch catching up to them in the point column, and so they've got the tiebreaker for now. Cleveland neck and neck with the Crunch, and then Belleville on the outside looking in, but they're only 2 points back. So, Brad, right now, every single day can change the standings, and for Cleveland, again, the pressure, they're starting to feel it.
Yeah, you don't want to get too tight and take a look at those standings and see those teams getting closer. And you look back at last year in March, the Monsters went on a 7-game losing streak, only to find their way at the end of the year and win the division. So a lot of time left, but there's some big games coming up here, especially this weekend with 2 with Belleville, and these are points that they got to start picking up.
Now, as the regular season winds down across the AHL, if you're wondering who's in the playoff picture, who's outside, the league has an awesome thing they provide. It's called the Playoff Primer. You can get it on the league website. That's theahl.com under the Standings tab, and that'll tell you day by day what the playoff situation is for every team across the league. And we know that there's only one team who has clinched a playoff spot, and it's the Hershey Bears. So we'll move on. Next up on headlines, let's talk about the remaining schedule for Cleveland because, Brad, a bunch of good teams coming up for the Monsters here. 14 games left, and you see the breakdown. 3 games against Wilkes-Barre Scranton, 2 apiece against Texas and Toronto, 2 more against Belleville, You've got 2 against league-leading Laval, Grand Rapids, Lehigh Valley, and Rochester all on the schedule. Monsters just about 500 this year against those teams, but certainly all teams that are in the playoff picture, including Belleville, as they are threatening here in the north.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough way, and you're going to really earn your way into the playoffs with the schedule the Monsters have left the rest of the year. But again, like we've talked about, it can really set them up for success going into the playoffs because of the way they're going to have to play to get in.
All right, let's keep it moving on headlines here and talk about a whole host of recent transactions here for the Monsters. It's been kind of quiet this season in terms of the roster moves. Well, not anymore. Let's take it chronologically from what's happened most recently and then go back after that. On March the 14th, the swap of goaltenders as Jet Greaves was called up to NHL Columbus on emergency recall, necessitating the recall of Pavel Chayan to Cleveland from ECHL Cincinnati. And of course, he played in that game on the 15th, his third of the year for the Monsters. In addition to that, a trade acquisition here, Brad. Will McKinnon comes to Cleveland from the Utica Comets. That's a straight up AHL trade there for future considerations. And McKinnon, a guy in his second year, this is about depth, right, for the Monsters on defense where they've been kind of thin.
Yeah, it is. Obviously, Denton Matejchuk earlier on getting called up to Columbus. The season-long injury for Corson Kuhlman. Ole Bjorkvik home, getting knocked out with injury, so getting real thin on the back end, and so some of these moves kind of give the Monsters a little bit more depth on the back end.
Then after that McKinnon trade, or actually prior to that, on March the 11th, the Monsters also made a signing to an ATO. That's an amateur tryout contract for a really high-scoring and consistently scoring forward in the college ranks. Rylan Mosley, this season just about a point per game for the University of Wisconsin in the Big Ten, but before that, a great career at Michigan Tech there. And so he's a guy that is not just going to be here the rest of this year, Brad, but he signed an AHL deal for next year, too. And this is someone that the Monsters hope can help sort of bolster that secondary scoring.
Yeah, this is that time of year where you see a lot of these kind of college free agent signings in the past. Guys like Owen Sillinger, Roman Ashawn, Jake Gaudette, other players that have been signed in a similar fashion and have gone on to some really big roles with the Monsters. So, hopefully we get the same here.
Yeah, so we'll wait to see what Rylan Mosley can do when he cracks the lineup. We haven't seen that quite yet. And then before that, on March the 10th, this was an interesting one. It's not really a trade. It's sort of a swap of loans, but we'll break it down for you. The Monsters got Drew Bavaro, a defenseman who played really well in the Texas series and scored a goal, as we mentioned, his first in the American Hockey League while playing for the Monsters there. He was loaned by NHL Boston to AHL Cleveland from AHL Providence in exchange for the Monsters loaning the AHL contract of Jake Gaudette to the Providence Bruins. So it effectively is a trade, but it sort of is a loan swap and something you see in the American League after the trading deadline typically.
Yeah, you did a nice job there explaining that. It's a little bit complicated, but it essentially works out as a trade. And again, tough to see a guy like Jake Gaudette leave the locker room, but again, we talked about the defensive depth, and Drew Bavaro is someone that can step in and provide that.
Yeah, Drew Bavaro, too, important to note, if he were to be recalled, he would go to the Boston Bruins, not the Blue Jackets, as no contracts changed hands in that exchange. It's just a swap of loans there. And you mentioned Jake Gaudette. We'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show. All right, finally now on headlines, let's talk about the facts, Brad, and they're not pretty right now for the Monsters, but Cleveland in a little bit of a losing streak right now. They've dropped 4 consecutive games. First time they've done that all season long. They've also dropped 5 of 6, 2 wins in their last 10, and they're riding a 3-game losing streak at home, which is tied for the AHL's longest such active streak. So all that is just factual, and it indicates that Cleveland really has no more time to waste. I mean, you've got to take these challenging opponents that they've got on their schedule and find ways to beat these teams, and it all starts up next for Cleveland with the best team in the league, the Laval Rocket.
Yeah, it's one of those points of the year. Obviously, you don't like to have it happen at the end of the year, but right now it's almost where you have a game where the defense is playing well and you can't score goals, and then another game where you score 4 goals and your defense isn't there. So it's one of those situations where you just got to will your way through it, and there's no feeling sorry for yourself at this time of year. You got to find a way, and Monsters still have time to do that.
And you mentioned last season it was sort of a galvanizing late regular season losing streak that helped boost the Monsters come playoff time. So we'll see what happens there 14 games is a heck of a lot of games left to be played, and a lot remains to be settled. Finally, let's wrap up headlines real quick here with a player spotlight on Pavel Chayan. Brad, as the goaltending coach for the team, you've worked with Pav now for over parts of 3 seasons, doing great work in the ECHL this year. Only 3 American League games this season, maybe fewer than the Monsters expected him to have, but this is big for him to be back up at this level, and big for the Monsters to have not just 2, but perhaps 3 options once Jet Greaves comes back.
Yeah, it's been a situation where in the first couple of years of his career, he played 20 games in the American League both years. So this year, less transactions with goalies coming and going, but Pav's done a great job in Cincinnati, and that's what the ECHL is there for, to keep a guy like him playing games, developing, working on his game at that level, and then when he's get called up, he can step in right away. So looking forward to working with him again here in Cleveland and seeing him in the net.
All right, that's Brad Thiessen. I'm Tony Brown. Right now, time for a break on Monsters OT. When we come back, it's Keeping It Clean at Whistle Express Car Wash in Parma with Monsters captain Stefan Matteau. That and more straight ahead. Stay with us. You're watching Monsters OT on Rock Entertainment Sports Network, presented by Century Federal. Welcome back, everyone, for more Monsters OT presented by Century Federal here on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. I'm Tony Brown. Still to come, we've got Nick Blazer telling us who's hot across the American Hockey League. Then it's our Monsters alumni segment presented by True North Convenience Stores. But time now on the show to keep it clean at Whistle Express Car Wash in Parma with Monsters captain Stefan Matteau. Let's take a look. Okay, guys, we're keeping it clean at Whistle Express Car Wash in Parma. And our guest today, as you can see, Monsters captain Stefan Matteau. So, Steph, here we go. Let's talk some cars, man. How about your first car? What was that?
My first car was a Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Okay, so what went into that decision?
It had room. I wanted an SUV. I didn't have kids or any reason to have room. No dog, no nothing. It was just myself. But I liked the look, and it was a nice first car.
You know, if you could have any car that exists, what's your dream car here?
I really enjoy the pickup truck. I think I'd have a sweet truck, probably like a really nice Escalade or something.
Okay.
And then something fast, like a really nice sports car, McLaren or something like that. I think
Wow.
that's what I would
All
go
right.
with, yeah.
You know, you guys spend a lot of time on the road, not necessarily in the car, but on the bus. Just for the fans, like, what are some ways that you guys keep busy on those rides? Because in this league, they can be lengthy.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them. We play a lot of cards. There's movies going on the TVs on the bus at all times. Some guys are doing schoolwork, some guys are reading, but for the most part, it's just spending time together, really.
You know, the Monsters have such great support here in Cleveland, and you've played all over this industry, NHL, American League, lots of different places. What makes Cleveland the right spot for you and your family right now?
On the hockey side, like everyone knows, everyone loves coming to play into Cleveland, the road teams, and everyone who's here will speak highly of it forever. You know, we play in such a cool venue. We get a great fan base, which is, you know, it can get you up and excited on a Tuesday night when sometimes it's a little harder, but when you have 10,000 people behind you, it makes it so much better. And on off ice, you know, everything's accessible, and no big city traffic, but you have that big city feel. And for me, for the kids, the schools are great, the hospitals are great. You know, a lot of people to take great care of us here, so we've enjoyed everything.
All right, guys, well, that'll do it for Keeping It Clean here at Whistle Express Car Wash. That's Stefan Matteau. We got to get this guy to practice, so we'll see you next time. I'm Tony Brown. Well, good stuff there from Stefan Matteau. Great to catch up with the Monsters leader and the guy who wears the C. Wanted to remind you guys really quick before we take another break on Monsters OT about some big promotions coming up for Cleveland. Not too many home games left this season at Rocket Arena, but on Friday, March the 28th at 7 o'clock against the Texas Stars, we're all pumped for WGAR Country Music Night presented by 5 Iron Golf. It's going to feature the second post-game concert of the season for the Monsters. Sadie Bass is going to be here to perform. It's also a 1-2-3 Friday. And of course, the Monsters Food Drive presented by Trusted Sec is ongoing. After that, the next night, Saturday, March the 29th at 7, we're all excited to see Jet Greaves bobblehead night as the first 10,000 fans, as Cleveland again takes on the Texas Stars, are going to take home a Jet in a Jet bobblehead, which is truly unique, Brad. One of the best bobbleheads I've ever seen, I think, in my career. And of course, the Monsters Food Drive ongoing for that game as well, also presented by Trusted Sec. Both games are going to be on Rocket Entertainment Sports Network, but we want you in the house at Rocket Arena, so get your tickets now at clevelandmonsters.com. We'll step away. Up next, Nick Blazer tells us who's hot across the AHL on Monsters OT, presented by Century Federal. Welcome back, Monsters fans, to Monsters OT, presented by Century Federal here on Rocket Entertainment Sports Network. Tony Brown here with you from Rocket Arena. Right now, it's time to take a look across the AHL at Who's Hot with Nick Blazer. Nick?
All right, appreciate it, Tony. Welcome everyone back to another edition of Who's Hot around the American Hockey League. I'm Nick Blazer. Kicking things off with the Atlantic Division, it'll be the Hershey Bears within their last 10 games, a 7-2-0-1 record, currently on a 5-game point streak at 4-0-0-1 over that spread. Currently sitting in first place in the Atlantic Division, second place in the Eastern Conference at a great record of 37-15-5-1 for 80 points on the year, only trailing Laval there in that Eastern Conference for that top spot. Their player to watch, Chase Prisky, the defenseman, 9 points coming in the form of 1 goal and 8 assists over the last 5 games played, including 3 straight multi-point games there for the Blue Liner. He's the second best defenseman for point getting for the Hershey Bears, only trailing Ethan Bear, as he has that top spot for point getting on that Hershey squad. Then on to the North Division. Now it'll be the Syracuse Crunch within their last 10 games played, a 7-2-1 record, including a 4-game win streak starting back on March 9th. Monsters this season, a 2-0-1-1 record against the Crunch. That season series is finished, as all of those occurred there before the Christmas break. They currently sit in 4th place in the North Division standings, 10th in the Eastern Conference at a 27-19, 8-4 record, good for 66 points. Their player to watch will be Connor Sheary, the forward, 11 points in the last 6 games played, 4 goals and 7 assists there, including 2 game-winning goals. Moving along now to the Central Division, it'll be the Grand Rapids Griffins as the team to watch, a 5-3-1-1 record throughout their last 10 games played, including a current 3-game win streak. Sitting in 3rd place in the Central Division standings, 6th in the Western Conference at 32-22, 4-2, good for 70 points on the year, and they're just 1 win away for potentially being tied for 2nd place in that Western Conference with the Milwaukee Admirals. The Monsters are 2-4-0-1 versus the Griffins so far this season, and we'll have one more matchup with them here at Rocket Arena on April 9th. Their player to watch, Austin Watson. The forward, 6 points over the last 5 games played, 4 goals and 2 assists, along with a +3 rating, starting back on March 5th, which was a 3-2 shootout loss in Manitoba against the Moose. He is second in point getting on the Griffins roster with 37 points, only trailing teammate Joe Snively, who sits at 39. On to the Pacific Division now. A lot of movement over there, but it'll be the Colorado Eagles taking the top spot. Last 10, a 7-1-1-1 record, currently on a 4-game win streak, which started with a 5-1 W over Henderson on the road back on March 9th. Currently sitting in first place in both the Pacific and Western Conference at 34-15, 5-3 on the season at 76 points. They're also the first team in the entire American Hockey League to notch 200 goals for this season, as they average just over 3.5 goals per game. Now to their player to watch, TJ Tynan, 7 points in the last 4 games, all coming in the form of assists. No points in the most recent matchup, however, which was a 3-1 win over San Diego. He is the top point getter on the team with 45 points, 8 goals and 37 assists for the forward. And a nice fun fact for you, 83% of his career 638 points have come in the form of an assist. Well, that'll do it for Who's Hot around the American Hockey League. I'm Nick Blazer. We're going to throw it back to Tony Brown with more Monsters OT.
Great stuff as always, Nick. We appreciate it. Time to sneak in one more fast break here on Monsters OT, presented by Century Federal. Up next, it's our Monsters Alumni segment, presented by True North Convenience Stores. Stay with us. There's more straight ahead on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. Welcome back one more time on Monsters OT, presented by Century Federal here on Rock Entertainment Sports Network with Brad Thiessen. I'm Tony Brown. So let's get set now with our Monsters alumni segment, courtesy of True North Convenience Stores. Fast, friendly, clean. And Brad didn't have to go into the history books for this one, but I thought we should take a minute to recognize the contributions of Jake Gaudette, who is now no longer with the Monsters, loaned to AHL Providence, but a guy who's been a part of things for 5 seasons here in Cleveland. And when I asked Trent Vogelhuber about his contributions, he said he was a big factor in the team developing this winning culture here. And so losing him is a bit of a blow to the group.
Yeah, he was obviously one of the longest serving Monsters at this time, and someone who was there at the beginning and kind of saw things through. I remember last year in the playoffs, not being in the lineup for game 1 in Belleville, game 2, he jumps in and scores a big goal and was a part of that run, and someone who's looked to in the locker room as that guy you go to, guys don't know where the grocery store is around Cleveland or things like that. Like, he was the guy who knew because he'd been here for so long, but great guy in the room, and he'll be missed. Yeah,
certainly a glue guy for sure. 158 games over parts of 5 seasons from 2020 to this year for Gaudette. You mentioned the playoffs, contributed in a big way there with 5 points in 12 games during that run last season, and a leader at the college level too. Captained UMass to a national championship once upon a time. So all the best to an Ottawa native, but a Clevelander at heart, I think, these days in Jake Gaudette, as he is the focus of today's True North Monsters Alumni Spotlight. To Gods, all the best and happy trails in your future endeavors. Well, that'll do it for Monsters OT, again presented by our friends at Century Federal. Lots of thank yous to hand out. First and foremost to Leo Simone, to Jeremy Hawks, to Brad Thiessen, to Nick Blazer, to our outstanding crew, to Century Federal, also to our friends at True North Convenience Stores. Thank you very much. I'm Tony Brown, and thanks to you for watching on the only place you'll find Monsters OT, Rock Entertainment Sports Network.